Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, morning miliwanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Ghana, Himalaya, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Heather Davis. She is here to celebrate Into Justin's World. Before we invite Heather into the studio, we want to invite you to connect with us on social media. So many places to do it. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram. Our Instagram page is exploding. We're so happy. And you can follow us on Twitter at JedleyMagic. And we would absolutely love it if you could go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. We've updated it. There's a player there that you can listen to the latest episodes of the show right there on the page. Quick, easy access to all of our 1,300 plus episodes. You can also sign up for our free newsletter, and you can use the contact button at the top of the page to send us a message. Let us know what we're doing right. Let us know how we can improve, and also let us know who you'd like to hear on the podcast. Joining us right now from the great state of Idaho, our guest today is here to celebrate a great series of books, the latest of which is titled Into Justin's World. Please welcome to the show, Heather Davis. Hey, Heather, how are you?
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. I'm great.
Is it accurate to say that in addition to being the author of Into Justin's World, you're also Justin's mom?
That is accurate, yes. I am part of Justin's world.
Yeah, so Justin these stories are based on a real, live, lovable person.
Yes, yeah. So Justin, when he was born, he didn't have any disabilities or challenges, but he was born into a really rough home. And so by the time he was 5, he had 3 different traumatic brain injuries. And so he now has traumatic brain injury and autism and some other challenges, epilepsy. But he looks like you and I. And so I've always kind of struggled with that because it's hard for people to have the compassion for him when it looks on the outside like he's being mean or like he's being grumpy, but really on the inside he is struggling.
Yeah. It is, the brain injuries, neurodiversity, autism, these are all things that not only does the people dealing with it suffer from, but we suffer from it too, in that we don't know how to deal with folks. We don't understand what's going on in their minds.
Yeah, exactly. And even people that have known him for a long time, it's hard to kind of know what to do when he's having a hard day, or but me and my husband and my kids, we know his world, we know his language, we know how he sees things, and that's really helped us to not just help him, but to be able to really open up our eyes to the world around us.
It's interesting. You just said that you and your family how Justin sees things. I've shared here on the podcast that before I went into performing and podcasting, I was in human services. And now this is decades and decades ago. But at that time, anybody who had a diagnosis of autism was severely disabled, and most of the time didn't communicate. And the kids that I was working with had very extreme developmental disabilities, and so the kids who were on that autism spectrum were the kids who rocked and shaked and maybe self-harmed. And I remember there was this one girl in particular named Rashi, and just a beautiful, sweet little girl, but she would go off and just rock for hours. And I remember thinking I don't know if I would like to be able to be inside her brain to see how the world is. It would be fascinating, but it also might be terrifying.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how you perceive the way Justin sees the world.
So there's a couple of things. So Justin has a lot of sensory issues. So having water on his skin is completely sensory overload. It's almost painful. Taking a shower is really difficult, but rain, washing his hands. So the idea of like swimming is just completely overwhelming. Wind blowing, that sensory, that soft touch on his skin is overwhelming and stressful. And he hears music. He hears every sound separately. And so it literally hurts his head, when he hears those things. And so those things are really hard. But then on the other side, I mean, this is not a kid anymore. He's, 28-year-old man, but to me, he's my kid. And every morning he tells me he helps the sun wake up. He sits on his bed and he talks the sun through waking up. You can do it. Good job, son. Good job. You're doing a good job. And he'll raise his hands. He has a real way with animals. Animals love him. Wild animals will be out and deer will come up to him. So there's just kind of this magic that he sees that the rest of us can't see. And there's a beauty that he sees that it's not there for the rest of us. So being able to kind of see those things through his eyes it's beautiful.
Yeah. I love how you're describing that. But also, as you're talking about, his sensory issues and the fact that water hurts. I mean, and that's the thing people don't understand is that it's not just that water might make you feel uncomfortable. It actually hurts.
Yeah.
And I have people in my life who a hug hurts.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's really hard for us to get our hands around. Mm-hmm. I imagine the past 2 years with COVID and wash your hands every time you move and someone walks in the room, that must have been incredibly difficult for you all.
Oh, COVID was incredibly difficult for him because first he's got the sensory, like you said, wash your hands all the time. I mean, that it's torture for him. But then wear a mask. I mean, that's so hard. And then he's a very social guy. Everyone's his friend. He loves everyone. And having to social distance, stay 6 feet away, can't go around other people, that was so hard. And so just the whole thing of COVID, it was really, really, really difficult for him. And so he had to come up with a lot of kind of creative solutions.
Oh, neat. And can you share one of those solutions with us?
So one of the solutions actually has to do with this book. He needs fresh air, and just walking around our backyard doesn't cut it after a little while. But we couldn't take him to the park because the parks were closed, and we couldn't take him, to all the places we normally go. And so we have it's called the Green Belt on the Boise River. It's just a trail along the river that we would go in the evening about 6 o'clock after everybody else was pretty much gone, and we'd go for walks on the Green Belt. And this was my solution to try to help him. He hated it. It was so hard. And he would just stomp, and the whole time, oh, wind, stupid wind. It's going to rain, clouds in the sky. And it was so, so hard until we had this really cool experience that I wrote about in my book, and now he loves it. But I'm not always good at these solutions. I don't always get them right.
Yeah. So tell us about this experience that we'll read about and into Justin's world.
Okay, so I mean, people think when I first tell them that I'm making this up, but I've got pictures. He was having a rough, walk, and we had said, okay, this is going to be the last one. We're not going to do this anymore. It's just too hard on him. We'll come up with something else. And we were going to just stop and turn around, and we sat down to have a snack first by this bridge. and Justin was being really quiet, which was unusual for, and he didn't want food. And we looked at him, and this fish, big fish, my husband said it must be a hatchery because he was too friendly, was right up at the surface of the water, just as close to the bridge as he could get. And Justin was just sitting there talking to him. And for I swear it seemed like forever. It was probably only 5 minutes, but it seemed like forever. Justin sat and talked to this fish, and this fish just sat there. And then it was time to go, and the fish swam away. But the whole way back to our car, Justin was telling me the things he would do with the fish. They would talk to the frogs, and they would see the birds, and they would swim in the river, and he was so excited. And the next day he wanted to go for a walk and see if he could find his friend the fish. And we haven't seen him again, but every time he's optimistic. Oh, he's sleeping. Maybe next time. And it just totally changed. He was able to see the beauty of the river because this fish was beautiful to him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm a true believer in a higher power, and yes. I can't help but think that maybe a spirit whispered into the ear of that fish and said, why don't you go hang out with Justin?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely believe that. He has many guardian angels that watch over him, and I believe that.
So very neat. If you don't mind, I want to dig a little bit deeper into your relationship with Justin. You shared with us earlier that he was born into a really rough family, and I'm assuming that it wasn't your family.
No, I was not that rough family. So we did special needs foster care. And so Justin came to us as a special needs foster child. And at that time, and you'll relate to this, it was so that he could be with us for 2 weeks until they had room for him at the state school and hospital, because they said he was too severely disabled to live in a home environment. So this is kind of that, a couple decades ago mentality, and he was having 30 seizures a day and had been abused. So he had a lot of behaviors and a lot of really difficult things, but we just fell in love with him. And so, when they came 2 weeks later and said, hey, we're not quite ready for him. Can you take him, for a little while longer? Yeah. And, and 2 weeks later, yeah. And then the next time they came and said, hey, don't keep looking. We want him to stay with us. And so he's been with our family for just over, 22 years. And I'm not built for having babies. I had 9 failed pregnancies. We have 2 biological children that were, kind of miracle babies. And so Justin coming into our home he was just what we needed. He brings that kind of softness out of everybody. And, he was just really a blessing to our family.
Wow. I know that people are listening to this and thinking to themselves, this human being has so many needs, and it must take hours and hours, and here it is 28 years old, and he is still so very, very needy, and they're, I'm sure, picturing themselves thinking, I couldn't do this. But meanwhile, they're hearing you saying that it was a blessing and a gift.
So I think when people say, I couldn't do this, it's because they've never had to, never been put in that situation, and I guess we didn't have to, but you just kind of do it. And Justin, with everything that he's got going on, is the happiest person you'll ever meet. And he's just sweet. And so he really puts things in perspective. You really are able to have just a different perspective of things. Your own personal challenges don't seem quite so hard. You have a hard time complaining about things not going well when Justin just had 3 seizures that day and he's still smiling, and so he really is. I mean, he brings something to our family that we couldn't get any other way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not great at math, but I know we were talking before the show and you were sharing with us that you have 8 kids.
I do.
So
yeah.
so 2 biological kids and Justin. So you open up your arms to at least 5 other kids.
So we adopted a family of 5 biological siblings. Yeah. At one point, we had a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and then Justin was 13. So life has been crazy.
Yeah. I have to say this, I when we have somebody from a military family on the show, I always want to recognize and thank them for their service. And I want to thank you and your family for the service that you've given not only to our country, but to our world. There are literally, and we've talked about this on the show a lot, I think the number is 400,000 kids on any day in the foster care system who are praying for a forever home. And you stepped up and you answered that call 6 times. And that is such a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Well, and thank you for saying that. And you're right. There's such a need for good foster parents, these kids. We didn't intend to adopt 5 children. We were doing special needs foster, and our first daughter came, and we fell in love with her. She was little tiny teeny thing, and we found out she had sisters, and we thought, how could we tell this beautiful little girl that we love that we could have opened our home to her sisters, but we chose to not bring them in. And as we met each one of them, there wasn't one that you wanted to throw back. They're all such unique, such beautiful, such just charismatic. They're just really, really, really wonderful people. And so each time it didn't feel like we had a choice. It just felt like, how could we do anything different?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've heard people say, you shared with us, and thank you for being so open, that you weren't, to use your words, you weren't built for pregnancy. Yeah. You weren't built, and the 2 biological kids that you had, it was a miracle. And you also had some tragedies. I've known people who've had similar experiences, and when my beautiful wife and I have suggested, well, there are lots of kids looking. Usually it's the guy, but one of the things we hear is, oh no, I want my own kid. I can't love something that's not from me. And I think that's ridiculous, but I don't know. Can you answer that person?
Oh, first of all, I think that, people know what's right for their own families. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to tell someone this is what you have to do, but you don't know how much you can love until you have a child. And I can tell you, I do not love those children that came from my body 1 ounce more than I love those children that came to us through adoption. Not even a little bit. And there's just that connection. It's not for everybody. But man, to think that you couldn't love someone because they didn't come from your body it's just not right. It's just not true. Mm-hmm. That love for a child is just there. And, you talked about a higher power. I truly believe that God loves these children, and he increases your ability to see them through his eyes.
What a fascinating comment that God gives you the ability to see them through his eyes, to see how special they are. I was just sharing with a guest not long ago, my favorite verse from Jeremiah was that God delights in you.
Yes.
And what a gift that is for you, that you are able to experience that same delight in those kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. He wants us to be happy, and he wants them to be happy, and I think he helps us. We have to, be open, and it's not always easy. I do not want to make it sound like, I've had 8 kids, most of them within 8 years of each other and special needs. And I've been super patient and Mary Poppin-like, and it's been super easy all this time. That is not true. There have been many times I've been curled up in a ball, not sure how I'm going to make it through the day. But at the end of the day, the goal was, if everyone knows that I love them, then we're okay. And today's been a good day.
This is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And we've talked a lot about the benefits that kids get from reading books. We've also talked a lot about the benefits that parents get from reading books with kids.
Yes.
On those days when you had those kids from 1 to 13 and you had this house full of life and chaos, did you ever just decide to deal with the chaos by picking up a book and gathering everybody around and reading?
Man, you have no idea how often. My house, I had the philosophy kids can never have too many balls or too many books. And I have books to help teach every imaginable thing. I have books to help to explain things, because I truly believe that, you can pick up a Berenstain Bears and read about the importance of telling the truth and talk about it without it feeling judgy, without it, pointing fingers, so much easier than if mom says, okay, let's talk about what you just said, and so we do that. And then there are books that I have that, help me to explain to them how much I love them. And there's books that I have that we just love. Sometimes all my teenagers and adult kids will come over and we'll just sit down and read one of our stories that we loved as children. It's just, there's just something, it's just beautiful. And that's why I started writing children's stories.
Yeah. So what kind of conversations do you think families can have as they're reading into Justin's world together?
Okay, so there are a couple of things. First of all, I think the first part of Into Justin's World talks about some of the challenges he has. I think that's a great time to talk about, do you relate to Justin? I'm overjoyed how many people I've had message me and say, my son said, that's just like me. And they feel seen. And it's easier for parents to kind of understand, kind of like we talked about before, to talk about it when we're talking about Justin, so they can say, yeah, that's hard, or this is hard, kind of like that's hard for Justin. But then for neurotypical children to say, okay, let's look. Does it look like Justin's grumpy on the outside? What do you think he's feeling on the inside? And that helps them to look at these children that are in classrooms with them, and see them a little differently. But then the other thing, there's this other side of the book that's just this fun, magical journey in his imagination. And it's a wonderful time to talk about imagination and what would your journey look like? What kind of things would you like to do if you had a magical fish and you could go and do whatever you want? And there's a lot of things that are there that I think are available. But what I really, really hope it does is help children who are autistic and have developmental disabilities to feel seen and know that, that they're not alone, and neurotypical children to see them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a really important point. To be seen and to see. So my beautiful wife and I ran a ministry for folks who were experiencing homelessness.
Oh.
And one of the great, and it was a simple ministry. We served desserts to the guys on Fridays, and most of these guys had been disinvited. This was a shelter of last resort. They had been disinvited from the other shelters in the area for various reasons. The greatest gift that we gave them was when we looked at them in the eye, instead of just passing out the desserts like this, we would look at them in the eye and say, hi, how are you? What would you like? And that they gave back to us too. It was, when their eyes lit up
Yeah.
And we had this moment where there's two human beings meeting each other. And that moment, that's a beautiful moment. And I think that that's something, it'd be a wonderful thing to teach all of our kids, to just look for those moments of connection.
It's not something that we really teach as a culture, you know. I mean, I guess we do through example, but not explicitly. But you're right; it's so important. What a blessing for those men and women to have you see them as people, as individuals, to feel seen, to feel welcome. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and you were talking about, you know, helping neurotypical kids see folks like Justin, help them understand the feelings that they have. I think that one of the really valuable benefits of teaching our kids this, to have this empathy, to look beyond the surface, is that no matter who a kid is, every kid feels like they're not enough in some ways. They feel different. And lots of kids spend lots of time trying to hide that, trying to pretend that they have it all together. And wouldn't it be a blessing to help them just know that it's okay for them to be different? They don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even just that Justin's not perfect. This isn't the bad side of being Justin and the good side of being Justin. This is just Justin, you know, and these things that you feel like aren't great, you know, I have a lot of things about me that I feel like aren't great. I can understand that, but they're not the bad stuff about us and the good stuff about us. It's us, and learning to kind of accept ourselves. Yeah. I think that that's so important.
Yeah. So very important. Well, it's really important for us to let everybody know where they can go to find out more about Into Justin's World and find out more about you.
Okay, so you can go to my website at heathershelpfulstories.com. It's also available on Amazon. It will be available soon on Barnes & Noble. We're just about there. And for people here that are local, it's available in our Idaho History Museum. I'm so excited. It's one of Justin's favorite places, and they're carrying his book.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, we want to encourage everybody to check out Into Justin's World, a beautiful book by our guest, Heather Davis. Heather, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Please be sure to join us on the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Cindy Williams-Schraben. She'll be here to celebrate This Could Be You, her debut picture book. That's the next episode of the podcast. Hey, if you're the author of a fantastic children's book, please do yourself a favor. Visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to find out how we can help you celebrate your wonderful book with the world. You can be a guest on the podcast. You can submit your book to our Certified Great Read panel. You can also take part in our monthly promotion program. So many ways to let the world know about your fantastic book. Find out about all of them at readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, want to thank our guest, Heather Davis. Please be sure to check out Into Justin's World. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking to you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.